he went up the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
You may be seated. Here's a fundamental question. Is it our job to win? Are we supposed to win? It's a tricky question, right? That's why people didn't jump in immediately and answer it either way out loud in front of everybody, because then I might have said, "Nope, you're wrong." If I'd asked the normal children's church question, like, "Who do you love?" you could all say,
Jesus.
Yeah, there you go. My mom was the right answer. I'm kidding. Maybe Jesus is your mom, and then that's fine. But the reason this question is tricky is, we know on one hand that that's definitely not at the center of the gospel message of Christ, that the goal is to win in some kind of abstract sense. And win what? Like, what are you supposed to win? On the other hand, we know the consequences of not winning in many instances. Like, we're all living in the consequences of certain people not winning certain things right now. I was in Phoenix last week, and on the flight back, I did this weird, I don't know why I did this, but I watched this documentary about Jacinda Ardern, who was the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who surprised everybody by winning when she won and actually didn't want it. But then, like, her way of governing aligns much more with my own values. So the whole time I was watching it, I was thinking, like, imagine if somebody had won like that here. But go back to the question, is it our job to win? Are you supposed to win? And win what? Jesus sits down with his disciples in front of this crowd of people and preaches this sermon, which is probably his most famous sermon. And you could say that, generally speaking, what he does is preaches a sermon about losers. Or even if not losers in the sense of like they lost a game, losers in the sense that they have a feeling of loss. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek. In order to show mercy, You often have to choose not to win even when you could win. It's a form of mercy. I have the winning next thing I could say in this fight that I'm having with somebody, and I choose not to say it. That's mercy. Blessed are the peacemakers, and then, of course, all the people who are persecuted and reviled. These are not the winners. There's loss. And Jesus names them blessed, and he connects their blessing to promises. This is kind of core in however we understand the gospel, that what you receive in Christ or through the word of Christ or whatever is promises that are somehow more powerful than the realities you're currently experiencing. So, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. That's the promise. Not that you're magically no longer going to mourn, but there is this thing you can expect and hope for. So this is the structure of the Beatitudes. This is how Jesus put these out. What they do is they set some level of expectations of how you live in the world, how you move, how you act. And it can get a little complex. So, example, I have many friends who live in smaller towns around the Twin Cities area, and they've been reporting with some regularity about the extent to which the oppressive presence of ICE is not just impacting Minneapolis, but like the whole state and the whole region. And the meek, the poor, the way that whole system impacts them is many of them have to hide. So like I have a friend who teaches in one small town in Minnesota where a third of the students are not going to school right now because the families are holed up. And that's one kind of hiding related to your vulnerability, the sense of like, am I safe if I go out under kind of this oppressive regime of policing? But there's another kind of hiding that's happening right in plain view also there. This is the part I just entirely don't understand. I might at least be sympathetic to people being in the same space with me who argue that immigration enforcement should be more strict than I think it should be. We could have debates in the public square about how much immigration laws should be enforced. I can't have a debate with anybody that seems reasonable to me at all, that anyone, anywhere, at any time, should be able to mask themselves, point a gun at you, and act like you're the police without ever having to prove that you're the police, and hide your identity. This makes no sense to me under any construal of which I can think that that's somehow reasonable or good or right. But of course, the reason they want to wear those masks is because they want to hide. Surveyed ICE officers and asked them, if you had to go unmasked, would you keep doing your job? And like 2/3 of ICE officers said they wouldn't keep doing their jobs. So you know why they need the masks. They're not going to have a force. Why did the stormtroopers wear helmets? Besides the fact that it was weird to see a bunch of clones all looking exactly the same in public, right? It was that whole thing. So you have these two kinds of hiding. The one kind of hiding is out of the meekness and vulnerability, and the other kind of hiding is out of shame, of somehow deeply knowing that what they're doing and how they're doing it is wrong. Now, the gospel can get misappropriated in this space and does get misappropriated in this space. You've probably seen this repeatedly. What's happened is many voices in our government and many of those ICE officers have wanted to claim the last two verses of the Beatitudes as if it applies to them. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. I'm sure that you've encountered this, that there's a whole contingent of apparently Christian nationalists who think that they're being oppressed for practicing Christian nationalism and put themselves into this category of the persecuted, the reviled, utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. And they, because they think that somehow the system that's currently running is a Christian system, they're being reviled on account of Christ. They even will take pride in the last part then. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. That's the real deepest part of the propaganda. That's always been the propaganda of militant religious organizations, is you could do the most heinous thing. It might even end your own life, but since you're doing it for the cause, you'll be rewarded like the prophets. But you have to be careful with this part. What I always like to say, my main interpretive commentary on the last part of the Beatitudes is essentially, you have to be careful. Are you being persecuted and reviled on the name or on the account of Christ, or just because you're being an ass? And there is no protection in the Beatitudes for just being a total jerk. That's not what it says. And in spite of the fact that some people misuse these texts to protect themselves for being jerks and thinking that that's what it means to be persecuted, what Jesus is actually saying here and all the way through the Beatitudes, and the main way you need to interpret the Beatitudes is always within the framing of he's speaking first and foremost about himself as a model of the Beatitudes. So you could ask yourself, was Jesus ever so ashamed of himself and his actions that he had to wear a mask? There's a good test. What's the answer? No. In fact, one cloak, and in the end, naked on a cross. What was Jesus persecuted and reviled for? Solidarity with foreigners who kept coming into Israel that he would talk to at the well, among other things. And the mourning, and all the people that he lists in the Beatitudes. So the peculiar power of the Beatitudes is not only are they poetic, not only do they speak because the one speaking them is embodying them, but then their profound power is in the fact that by him embodying them and speaking them, he shows his solidarity with all the people he names who have that shared experience that he's experiencing, that he names in the Beatitudes. So you have found this Beatitudes to be powerful because at different times in your life, you have mourned or are mourning. Most people are the meek and are sitting around wondering what they could do and how they could ever win because the whole system is stacked against them. Most people are surprisingly merciful most of the time, granting all kinds of people the benefit of the doubt, and are peacemakers. And as Jane points out, most people are low-key living in a system that feels like they're being persecuted and oppressed. Not maybe by anybody in particular right now, until you're one of the people in cars on the streets in Minnesota who have 3 guns aimed at you by masked vigilantes posing as some kind of legal system. But you know what those things are. You know what could be better. You know how much of what's around you has been designed by people who are benefiting from it. When you really kind of step back just a little bit, you realize how much it's like all constructed to extract from you and push you down. And so you feel this. And then what you have to kind of test out is when you're feeling that way in particular. I think Jane's song, which is really great, is a really good example of this. You know, you're naming that you feel this need for mercy. That ultimately the test is, yes, you can ask for a lot of mercy, but if you really want to identify with these last verses, you have to ask yourself seriously and honestly, is it because I am in solidarity with Jesus? Is it on my account? That's kind of the test. The passage that gets aligned with this one, the one that the planners of the lectionary decided should be next to the Beatitudes. Humorously, this is always the passage where I like to never tell the reader before they read it how to pronounce the special words in it. So there's always the chance that they're going to say shittim. I was waiting for that, Tom, but you went with shitem.
I didn't think I could say that in church.
Yeah. It is the standing joke, is just to see how the reader will handle what happened from Shittim to Gilgal. But at the end of the verse is the famous part, and it's a really, really great line. People are frequently under the understanding that they have to make peculiar sacrifices to God in order to get in right with God. It's been a big part of human history to think that there have to be economic sacrifices or donations or burnt offerings or special liturgies or actions like that. And so this clarifying line in Micah has always been so powerful. He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Which is, if you would like, the answer you could give the next time somebody asks you, are you supposed to win? And what that means is, I mean, if you step out of church and out of the faith-based space, and if you're talking about just straight up political organizing, I'm in as much as anybody else on get the best candidate to win. It's the way the system works. So I'm not saying don't go do politics. Don't try to, get this system in your company that you like better than others because it's going to be better for the customers or whatever that situation is. But in terms of how we live as Christians, we don't judge ourselves or God on whether what we're called to do gets us to that winning point. It's a whole different thing, and it's more like the test that I gave a little bit earlier in the sermon, like, are these the ways that you will live and move and act in the world so that you don't have to wear a mask? that you won't be ashamed. And the solidarity that's an aspect of the Beatitudes is that the shame piece has a lot to do with when you get a good sense of who your actual community is. And when you can remember that when you are grieving, others are grieving, and that when you're seeking peace, others are seeking peace, and that if you are poor, others are poor, and if you're feeling persecuted and reviled, others are feeling persecuted and reviled, and if you can get that sense, and then if you can add into the mix that you believe and trust that Jesus Christ names himself as being a part of and acts, thank you, in certain ways so that you're in that space together with Christ, then this becomes incredibly comforting, a great relief, because you don't have to win, and Christ will stay with you there. Amen.